He was a ruthless landlord, obsessed with profits. She was the poor old woman he was desperate to evict. He publicly humiliated her, served her an eviction notice in the lobby, and laughed as his fiancée tripped her. All without knowing. She was the secret owner of the entire building. Have you ever felt completely invisible? Have you ever been judged by what's in your wallet, and not what's in your heart? This isn't just a story. It's a shocking lesson in what happens when arrogance meets the ultimate plot twist. This is the story of Austin Patterson, a cold-hearted manager who saw kindness as weakness, and Grace Allen, the quiet resident he tried to destroy. But Grace's secret identity was her greatest weapon. Prepare yourself for an emotional, heart-touching journey of revenge and redemption that will challenge everything you think you know about power. But this story goes so much deeper. It's a drama that becomes an unexpected love story. Before the redemption, there is a brutal fall. He will have to lose everything: his job, his fiancée, his pride, and embark on a desperate search to find the woman he just destroyed. This is a life-changing emotional roller coaster. Are you ready for this ride? Comment revenge or redemption below for what you think he deserves. Like this video as a sign of respect for Grace's secret, and share it with someone who loves a story where the underdog wins. And make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because you will not want to miss a single second of this. Let's begin. The lobby of the Grand wasn't just a room, it was Austin Patterson's personal theater. He walked the polished marble floor not merely as a manager, but as a conqueror, his sharp footsteps echoing his sharp intentions. This building was his chessboard, and he was about to put a pawn in check. Today's target was the tenant in 3B, a quiet woman he barely knew but already despised. He was going to make an example of her, a public drama to assert his control. He smoothed the lapel of his $5,000 suit, a cold smirk playing on his lips. This landlord had no time for sentiment, it was all about the numbers. He saw her then, standing by the ridiculous indoor fountain. Grace Allen, the problem tenant with the rent-controlled lease. She was helping another resident, Mr. Henderson, with his groceries, her head bowed in quiet conversation. She looked frail, almost invisible, the absolute epitome of the poor woman who, in Austin's sterile and luxurious world, simply didn't belong. He saw her constant kindness not as a virtue but as an irritating, unprofitable weakness. This was the crux of the rich versus poor battle, and for him, it was just necessary spring cleaning. He strode towards her, his presence sucking the warmth from the air. "Mrs. Allen," he announced, his voice booming with artificial authority, deliberately loud enough for the gathering onlookers. He stopped so close she had to take a half-step back, her eyes rising to meet his. He relished this moment, the predator cornering its prey. He held out a crisp white envelope, not offering it, but presenting it, like a verdict. "Consider this your formal notice." Grace Allen looked at the envelope, then at him, her face calm, almost unnervingly still. He hated that. He wanted her to crumble. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises," he continued, his voice dripping with disdain. The silence in the lobby was absolute, a shocking vacuum broken only by the sound of the fountain. Austin needed more, he needed to see her humiliated. "Frankly," he added, "we're upgrading the standards of this establishment. We can't have residents who can't keep up." He gestured vaguely at her simple cardigan, a clear insult to her appearance and her perceived status. The air grew thick, an intensely emotional moment for everyone watching, but Austin felt only a rush of power. The poor woman just looked at him, her clear eyes holding his, a quiet dignity radiating from her that was more infuriating than any outburst would have been. Why wasn't she begging? Why wasn't she crying? This wasn't the satisfying drama he had envisioned. This entire confrontation, this power play, was a crucial mistake. Austin Patterson, for all his bluster, was completely in the dark. He had no clue about her secret identity. He couldn't possibly imagine that this woman, the one he was so eager to see evicted, was, in fact, the secret owner of every single brick and beam in the building. He, the mighty landlord, was just a pawn in a much larger game, and had just insulted the queen. The plot twist was already in motion, long before Head even put on his suit that morning. Grace Allen wasn't just a resident, she was the architect of this whole scenario. She owned the building, and she was conducting a quiet audit of her own empire. Austin's public display of cruelty wasn't a victory, it was his final interview, and he was failing spectacularly. The surprise was still to come, but the seeds were sown. His act of hubris set the entire story in motion. He thought he was ending a tenancy, he was actually beginning his own life-changing education. He believed he was winning the battle of rich versus poor, but he was about to learn a lesson in humility. The real romance and redemption would grow from this very ugly, very public moment of shaming. He had just tried to evict the one person who held his entire world in her hands. He turned on his heel, satisfied, leaving her standing there with the notice. He walked away, the conquering hero in his own mind, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to be turned upside down. The woman Head just humiliated wasn't just a tenant, she was his boss, his judge, and, though neither of them knew it yet, his destiny. The game was on. Let's be perfectly clear about Austin Patterson. He wasn't just a landlord, he was a predator in bespoke armor. His universe was a cold equation of profit margins, expensive watches, and the relentless pursuit of more. He looked at the Grand, with its history and its heart, and saw only an underperforming asset. From his penthouse office, Head gazed out over the city, not with awe, but with a calculating eye, seeing only the numbers climbing. The human drama of the tenants below was just static, an inconvenient noise floor he had to manage. His philosophy was brutally simple: maximize luxury, purge the rest. The long-term tenants, the ones who had built the building so long before he arrived, were his primary obstacle. He referred to them in private meetings as pests, a financial drain, or antiques that needed to be cleared out. They were, in his mind, occupying valuable real estate that could be flipped into multi-million-dollar condos. The rich versus poor divide wasn't a societal problem to him, it was a business strategy, and he was the sharp instrument of curation. Any scrap of empathy Austin might have once possessed was buried deep beneath layers of ambition and expensive cologne. He had a genuine disdain for what he perceived as weakness, and in his worldview, poverty or even just not being fabulously wealthy was the greatest weakness of all. When he looked at the poor woman from 3B, Grace Allen, he didn't see a person. He saw a roadblock.
He was utterly determined to see her evicted, not just for the apartment, but for the principle of it. His contempt was a palpable thing. Had systematically instructed his staff to deprioritize maintenance requests from the lower, rent-controlled floors. Had implemented new, ridiculous building enhancement fees, hoping the financial pressure would force them out. The idea of a genuine love story or a heart-touching connection made him scoff. Love, like business, was transactional. Life was about winning, and Austin Patterson was, by every metric he valued, winning. But, oh, the irony. He was so focused on his own narrative of power, so blinded by the gleam of his own reflection in the chrome fixtures, that had become a caricature of the ruthless manager. He was playing checkers while believing it was chess. He was about to find out, in the most shocking way possible, that he was merely an employee. The secret owner, the real power, was watching his every move. His obsession with the bottom line made him blind to the secret identity hiding in plain sight. He was so consumed with the mechanics of the evicted notice that he never once stopped to ask why. Why was this poor woman so unfailingly kind? Why did she never complain about his tactics? Why did she seem, well, completely unbothered by him? He was too arrogant to see the plot twist he was living in. The man who thought he was in charge was about to meet the woman who actually owned the building, and, spoiler alert, she was not impressed with his performance. His entire world was a house of cards, and he was so busy admiring the view from the top, he didn't realize the foundation was about to be pulled out from under him. The coming surprise would be a life-changing one. This cold-hearted approach was his armor, but it was also his prison. He had systematically cut himself off from any real human connection, believing it was a liability. He had no idea that the pest in 3B was the only one who could offer him a path to redemption. But before that, he would have to fall. And Grace Allen, his boss, was about to let him. This lack of humanity was his defining trait, and it would be his downfall. He saw Grace Allen as a symbol of everything he was trying to erase. What he didn't know was that she was the one holding the eraser, and his name was at the top of her list. The drama was just getting started. While Austin Patterson operated from a sterile, sky-high office, Grace Allen lived in the heart of the building. She was the quiet, unseen glue holding the community together. To her neighbors, she was just Grace, the kind-hearted, soft-spoken woman from 3B who always had a cup of sugar, a helping hand, or a listening ear. She was the one who remembered birthdays, watered plants for vacationing neighbors, and mediated small disputes with a gentle wisdom. She was, in essence, the building soul, disguised as a poor woman. Her kindness was her armor, her camouflage. But Austin Patterson, a man who only spoke the language of power and profit, misinterpreted every single gesture. He saw her kindness as weakness. He saw her quiet nature as fear. He openly scorned her, often making snide, passive-aggressive comments when he passed her in the hallway. "Still with us, Mrs. Allen?" Head sneer, a condescending smirk on his face. He truly believed she was a nobody, just holding on, waiting for the final blow of the evicted notice. He couldn't have been more wrong. Gosh, was he wrong. Grace was observing him with a quiet, profound sadness. She saw the gaping void behind his arrogant landlord facade. She saw the manufactured rich versus poor conflict not as a business necessity, but as a symptom of his own deep-seated insecurity and emotional poverty. She saw a broken man, so focused on humiliating others that he was blind to his own humanity. And yet, she always responded to his barbs with a simple, quiet politeness that secretly drove him insane. This secret identity was Grace's most powerful tool. By living as a nobody, she was getting a front row seat to the truth of her own company. She saw which managers were corrupt bingo, Austin, which doormen were kind, and which tenants were genuinely struggling. She was a secret owner, conducting the deepest, most personal audit imaginable, and Austin Patterson was, unfortunately for him, her star case study. He was the rot she had come to find. It's a funny thing, power. What do you think is a greater superpower, limitless wealth, or limitless kindness? Drop a comment with your choice. Grace was living proof that maybe they were one and the same. She had the power to crush Austin, to have him humiliated and fired before he finished his morning espresso. But that wasn't her style. That wasn't the point. She was waiting. She was giving him just enough rope, hoping, perhaps, to see a single thread of decency, a glimmer of hope for redemption. But her patience was wearing thin. Austin's casual cruelty wasn't just directed at her. It was affecting other tenants. Good people she felt responsible for. The drama he was creating was toxic. The poor woman he saw was, in reality, the judge presiding over his career. The plot twist was being meticulously crafted. She owned the building, and the quiet was about to end. Grace Allen's calm was simply the silence before the storm. She wasn't just testing her manager, she was testing the system she had built. Was it so broken that it promoted men like Austin? She needed to know. And Austin, blinded by his own ego, was giving her all the evidence she needed. The shocking revelation wasn't just that she was the owner, it was why she was hiding. And Austin was the why. This disguise was perfect. It preyed on the exact prejudice that Austin championed. He was so obsessed with the rich exterior that he couldn't see the rich interior. He judged the book by its simple, cloth-bound cover, never imagining it was the author herself. The surprise would be a lesson he'd never forget. She watched him walk away from that first encounter in the lobby, the eviction notice in her hand. She looked down at it, a small, sad smile on her face. "Well, that's one way to resign, Mr. Patterson," she whispered to herself. The life-changing moment was coming, and Austin was the one who had just punched his ticket. The drama in the Grand wasn't a solo performance. Austin Patterson, in his quest for a life devoid of genuine emotion, had found a perfect partner. His fiancée, Bianca, was a mirror image of his own cold ambition, wrapped in designer labels and dripping with diamonds. She saw the building as her future kingdom, and like Austin, She viewed the long-term, poorer tenants as an infestation. She was a walking, talking embodiment of the ugliest side of the rich versus poor divide, treating the staff like furniture and the residents like dirt. One afternoon, Bianca was with Austin, walking to the main corridor, when Grace Allen stepped out of the elevator, carrying a small bag of groceries. Bianca, seeing an opportunity for her own brand of cruel sport, flashed a wicked smile at Austin. As Grace walked past, Bianca deliberately and with perfect timing stuck out her slender, high-heeled foot. Grace, caught off guard, stumbled hard, her groceries a carton of milk and some apples spilling across the pristine marble floor. It was a petty, childish, and utterly cruel act of humiliation. And Austin laughed. He actually chuckled a short, barking sound. He found the scene amusing, a bit of surprise entertainment. It was just another confirmation that the poor woman didn't belong, that she was so clumsy, so in the way. The milk spreading across the floor was a perfect metaphor for the mess he was trying to clean up. But Grace's reaction was, once again, the most shocking part of the encounter. She didn't cry out. She didn't curse. She didn't even look angry. Goodness! She was infuriating. Grace Allen simply caught her breath, braced herself on the wall, and looked at the mess. Then she looked at Bianca and finally at Austin, with a quiet dignity that was almost supernatural. She simply said, "I hope tripping me made your day a little better, dear." She then knelt, slowly, to pick up her apples. This broke Austin's brain. It was a plot twist in his expected drama. He expected tears. He expected yelling. He expected weakness. He wanted her to be humiliated. Instead, he felt a sudden, sharp sting of something. Shame? Confusion? The poor woman had, with a single sentence, turned the humiliation back on them. His fiancée's cruel laugh died in her throat. The victory felt hollow and, weirdly, like a loss. This moment was a tiny, hairline crack in Austin's arrogant facade. Grace's quiet strength was a genuine puzzle. It was so alien to his world of loud, superficial drama and transactional relationships. He, the powerful landlord, the king of the castle, had been effortlessly disarmed by the peasant. It was an emotional judo flip, and he was left standing there, completely baffled. It was a feeling he didn't like not one bit, but it was a feeling he couldn't shake. If you were Austin, would that moment have given you pause, or would you have laughed it off with Bianca? Be honest in the comments. This was a turning point, a small seed of doubt planted in his mind. The secret identity of Grace Allen was more than just a title. It was a strength of character he couldn't comprehend. She owned the building, yes, but she also owned herself, a kind of ownership Austin and Bianca knew nothing about. He tried to brush it off, to join in Bianca's subsequent mockery as they walked away. But the image of Grace Allen, kneeling to pick up her spilled groceries, her dignity intact while theirs was in tatters, stuck with him. He was used to people breaking. He wasn't used to people who made him feel broken. He didn't know it, but this small, ugly incident was a first, tiny step toward his unwilling redemption. The secret owner had just scored a moral victory, without even trying. The rich versus poor battle was, in Grace's mind, not about money at all. It was about character. And Austin's account was coming up seriously short. The life-changing lesson was getting closer, and Austin was still failing every test. A few days later, the building's unspoken drama was interrupted by a very real, very loud one. At 2:03 p.m. on a Tuesday, the piercing shriek of the fire alarm echoed through the Grand. Panic was immediate. Wealthy residents and frantic staff poured out of apartments and offices, a wave of chaos and expensive perfume. They bottlenecked at the main stairwell, a dangerous crush of people. It was the exact kind of crisis that tests what people are made of. And Austin Patterson, the man in charge, the decisive landlord, was made of nothing. He burst from his office, saw the screaming crowd in the lobby, and his mind went completely, utterly blank. Yikes! All his tailored arrogance evaporated, replaced by a raw, visible panic. He didn't know the procedures. He didn't know which alarm was triggered. He just stood there, frozen, a statue of incompetence. He was a leader in name only, totally useless when it actually mattered. Then, through the chaos, A voice cut through the noise. It was calm, firm, and absolutely in charge. "Stop pushing. The west stairwell is clearer. Use the west stairwell. Mr. Henderson, you're on the 4th floor. The east stairs are closer. Take those." Someone helped Mrs. Gable with her dog. It was Grace Allen. The poor woman Austin was so desperate to see evicted had taken command. She was moving with an efficiency and intelligence that was simply shocking. She was a field marshal. She knew residents' names, their apartments, their needs. She directed the panicking flow of people. Her knowledge of the building's layout profound. She wasn't just a resident, she seemed to know the building's very bones. While Austin stood there, humiliated by his own paralysis, Grace was the one actually saving lives, or at least preventing injuries. The rich versus poor dynamic had just been inverted. Grace saw Austin frozen near the reception desk. She didn't scold him. She used him. "Mr. Patterson," she called out, her voice sharp. "Call 911. Tell them the alarm was triggered on the 7th floor, kitchen smoke, unit 712. The main panel is behind your desk." Now, her authority was so absolute, so unassailable that Austin, stunned, just obeyed. He fumbled for the phone, repeating her words like an automaton. The alarm, it turned out, was a false one. A small grease fire in Unit 712, put out almost immediately. But the revelation of the day was real. As the stunned residents and staff milled about, their adrenaline fading, all eyes were on Grace Allen, who was calmly comforting a crying child. Austin stared at her, his world tilted on its axis. How did this poor woman know the alarm panel's location? How did she know the unit? This was a plot twist that hit him like a physical blow. The woman had tried to destroy had just managed his building better than he ever could. The secret identity was still a mystery, but the fact of it was undeniable. There was something about Grace Allen he had missed, something massive. He wasn't just intrigued anymore, he was floored. He was a landlord who knew nothing. She was a nobody who knew everything. This emotional, life-changing event was surprise he couldn't process. The secret owner, though, he still didn't know that had just demonstrated her profound knowledge. She owned the building not just on paper, but in practice. Austin's entire perception of her and of himself was shattered. The respect he felt was terrifying. It was the beginning of a shift, a crack in his foundation. He felt a pull toward her, a curiosity so strong it eclipsed his previous disdain. The next phase of his redemption was about to begin, and it started with this moment of absolute, undeniable awe. The fire alarm incident didn't just rattle Austin, it broke him open. The image of Grace Allen, so calm and in control while he, the mighty landlord, was a quivering mess, played on a loop in his mind. His carefully constructed world of rich versus poor had been proven false. Competence, he was learning, had nothing to do with a bank account. His intrigue had morphed into a strange, obsessive curiosity. He had to understand her. Her genuine warmth was a lighthouse in the foggy, superficial world he lived in. He decided to seek her out, using the eviction as his flimsy excuse. He knocked on the door of 3B, his heart hammering away that had nothing to do with business. When Grace Allen opened it, she didn't look surprised or scared. She just looked tired. "Mr. Patterson," she said, her voice neutral. He started with his script about the evicted notice, but the words felt like ash in his mouth. Man, he was a terrible person. Instead, he found himself blurting out, "How did you know about the alarm? About Unit 712? It was the first honest question had asked anyone in years. Grace looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Would you like to come in, Mr. Patterson?" He entered her tiny, cluttered, warm apartment. It was the polar opposite of his sterile penthouse. It was filled with books, plants, and the smell of tea. It felt like a home. They talked, or rather, he did. He started, still posturing about the eviction, but her quiet, non-judgmental presence disarmed him. He found himself talking, really talking, about the pressure from his bosses, about the emptiness of his life, about the constant drama of his world. He spoke not as a landlord, but as a man, a lost, confused, and deeply unhappy man. And Grace Allen, The poor woman he was actively trying to make homeless. She just listened. Wow, this was the first real human connection Austin had experienced in. Well, maybe ever. There was no angle, no posturing, just two people in a room. The irony was suffocating. He was, against all logic, falling for her. Not her looks, not her status or lack thereof, but her essence. This bizarre, impossible love story was beginning to write itself in the margins of an eviction notice. A romance born not of attraction, but of authenticity. This connection was heart-touching, and it terrified him. He was sharing his soul with the victim of his own cruelty. He was seeing the world and himself through her clear, compassionate eyes, and he was horrified by what he saw. He was starting to see the rich versus poor narrative as a lie it was, a system designed to keep people like him empty and people like her oppressed. He left her apartment hours later, his mind a swirling mess of emotional conflict. The eviction notice felt like a dirty bomb in his pocket. A part of him, the old Austin, wanted to run. But a new part, a part that felt strangely alive, wanted to stay. He wanted to protect her. This sudden, fierce desire for her redemption, or maybe his own, was overwhelming. He still didn't know her secret identity. He had no idea the secret owner was playing him, or perhaps just giving him a chance. He didn't know that she owned the building, and that this entire conversation was part of her test. He just knew that this poor woman made him feel more human than his wealthy fiancé ever had. The plot twist was no longer external. It was happening inside his own heart. The love story, however improbable, had taken root. He was in deep, deep trouble. He was falling for the one person he was supposed to destroy. And this life-changing realization would force him to make a choice. Austin's mind was a battlefield. The emotional pull towards Grace Allen was undeniable, a heart-touching connection he craved. But the old Austin, the ruthless landlord, was still very much alive, and he was under immense pressure from his bosses and investors to clear the building. Get her out, Patterson. No more drama. Torn between his burgeoning love story and his deep-rooted pragmatism, he chose the only solution his world had ever offered him: money. He convinced himself it was a good thing. He would help her. He would test her, yes, but he was also solving his problem. He returned to 3B, this time with his corporate checkbook. He felt slimy, like a villain in his own story, but the old habits were strong. In his rich versus poor world, everyone had a price. He just had to find hers. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Grace, he said, trying to sound like a friend, a confidant. I know this whole evicted situation is. It's a mess. I want to help you. He opened the checkbook, the sound of the paper cover flipping open seeming obscenely loud in her quiet apartment. He scribbled, his handwriting sharp and angry 10,000. Just take this, he said, and leave quietly. No more drama. Find a new place. Start fresh. He held the check out to her, a peace offering from his world to hers. He genuinely expected her to take it. In his mind, 10,000 was a fortune for this poor woman. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card. He expected relief, gratitude, maybe even tears of joy. Instead, he was met with a silence so profound it was almost violent. He watched her face, and what he saw wasn't gratitude. It was a deep, crushing disappointment. And that was shocking. Grace Allen looked at the check, then up at his face. She didn't touch the money. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was not angry, but it was cold. My home is not for sale, Mr. Patterson. She gently, firmly, pushed his hand and the check back towards him. Some things are worth more than money. I truly thought you were starting to understand that. What a shame. Oof. That one hurt. The rejection was total. It wasn't just a no, it was a judgment. He had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. He stood there, humiliated in a way he had never been before. Not by her, but by himself. He had just offered to buy the soul of the only genuine person he had ever met. He had failed her test. The plot twist was that he was the poor one in this scenario, and his currency was worthless. What would you do? If you were in Grace's shoes, and everyone believed you were destitute, would you take the 10,000 just to get by? Or would you stick to your principles? Be honest in the comments. Grace's refusal was a life-changing moment for Austin. His ultimate weaponry was useless. His entire rich versus poor worldview had just been invalidated. He stumbled out of her apartment, the check still in his hand, feeling like a complete and utter fool. The secret owner he still didn't know had just given him a final, beautiful chance to prove he had changed, and he had thrown it back in her face. He proved that when pushed, he was still the same calculating landlord. This failure was catastrophic. Grace Allen now knew, without a shadow of a doubt, what she was dealing with. She knew that the man she had shared a real human connection with was, at his core, still broken. And Austin knew it, too. His path to redemption had just hit a massive $10,000 wall. The fallout from the 10,000 test was immediate and brutal, but not in the way Austin expected. He returned to his penthouse, the rejected check burning a hole in his pocket. Some things are worth more than money. Her words echoed, dismantling his reality. He looked around his sterile, expensive apartment, at the art he didn't like and the furniture he never sat on, and for the first time in his life, he felt utterly, desperately poor. The emotional conflict inside him wasn't a battle anymore, it was a surrender. The old Austin had lost. That evening, his fiancée, Bianca, arrived, bubbling with cruel excitement. "I heard you're finally giving the old hag the boot tomorrow," she chirped, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. "It's about time. I was thinking we could turn that whole floor into a private spa." Imagine, her voice, which he once found sophisticated, now grated on his nerves like nails on a chalkboard. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw only the emptiness he was trying to escape. "Don't call her that," Austin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Bianca paused, the bottle in her hand. "What? The poor woman? Please, Austin, that's what she is. We're doing the world a favor by shut up Bianca," he snapped. The word hung in the air, shocking both of them. "Just shut up. You don't know the first thing about her. She has more class, more dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire body." Bianca's jaw dropped. "Are you defending her over me? What's gotten into you? Is it all this drama with the evicted notice? You're acting insane." She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "Don't forget which side you're on, Austin. It's our world, the rich versus poor world. We win, they lose. That's the game." She tried to touch his arm, but he recoiled as if had been burned. "I don't want to win anymore," he whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Not like this. He knew, in that instant, with terrifying certainty, he was in love with Grace Allen. The impossible, absurd love story was real. He was in love with her authenticity, her strength, her soul. The romance wasn't about her, it was about who he was when he was near her. He saw the cruelty of his world, a world he had helped build, and it disgusted him. The argument that followed was explosive. Bianca was humiliated, furious at this sudden, incomprehensible betrayal. "You're throwing your whole life away for a nobody," she screamed. But Austin was resolute. He was finally seeing clearly. This heart-touching realization was his redemption, and he was grabbing it with both hands. But here raced the kicker, the tragic irony. This life-changing change of heart, this noble stand, it came too late. Way too late. While Austin was busy defending Grace's honor in his penthouse, the consequences of his actions of failed 10,000 tests were already in motion. He didn't know it, but the secret owner had seen his final, failed test. He had no idea that Grace Allen, the secret owner who owned the building, had already given the order. He was defending Grace, but he had already betrayed her. He had chosen his new path, but his past was about to catch up and destroy him. His redemption wouldn't be this easy. It wouldn't be a simple choice between 2 women. He was about to be tested in a way he couldn't imagine. The false defeat was coming, and he was walking right into it, armed with a new heart that was about to be broken. Austin's moral epiphany was real, but the universe, it seems, doesn't grade on a curve. It grades on action. The next morning, he marched into his office, a new man on a new mission. He was going to tear up the evicted notice. He was going to tell his bosses to shove it. He was going to fight for Grace Allen. But when he arrived, his bosses and investors were already waiting for him. their faces like stone. What Austin didn't know, of course, was that these men were just high-level tenants, board members of a company that Grace Allen herself owned. Patterson, good. You're here. One of them said, not even looking up, we heard you're getting sentimental. About 3B. That's not what we pay you for. The pressure was immediate and suffocating. The final order is in. She's out. Today. Now. You will change the locks, and you will have her removed. Or you'll be the one humiliated and escorted out. Do you understand? It was his job, his career, his entire identity as a successful, powerful landlord. And Austin, he choked. All his newfound conviction, his grand plans for redemption, his burgeoning love story. It all evaporated in the face of real-world consequences. The fear, the ingrained instinct to obey, the terror of losing his status, it all came roaring back. The rich versus poor warrior was still, at his core, a coward. He caved. It's just business, he muttered, the words tasting like poison. With a heart so heavy it felt like a stone in his chest, he took the master keys. He walked to her door, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key in the lock. This was the ultimate betrayal, not just of Grace, but the new man had promised himself had become. With a click that echoed the sound of his spine snapping, he changed the locks. He physically, irrevocably, locked Grace Allen out of her own home. He was standing at the end of the hall, steeped in his own shame, when she came back. She was carrying a small bag, perhaps from a morning walk. She reached the door, put her key in. It didn't turn. She tried again. The quiet, confused jiggle of the doorknob was the most agonizing sound had ever heard. She knew. She stopped, and she turned her head, looking down the hallway, her eyes finding his instantly. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, she just looked at him, and in her eyes he saw it all. Not anger, but profound, heart-touching disappointment. The look of someone who had seen a glimmer of light, only to have it snuffed out. The poor woman had sworn protect was now evicted. By him. This is it. This is the moment where all hope dies. The lowest of the low. Click the like button as a sign of respect for the dignity Grace showed. Even in this moment of ultimate betrayal, Austin was humiliated, not by her, but by his own pathetic weakness. He had failed. Grace Allen, the secret owner of the entire goddamn building, stood in the hallway, locked out her own apartment. She held his gaze for one more life-changing second, then turned, with her small bag in hand. She walked calmly to the elevator. He had just evicted the woman he loved. This was a false defeat, the re-engagement hook, the point of no return. Austin Patterson had just destroyed the only good, real thing in his life. The plot twist was that he was the one who had just been destroyed. The drama was no longer a game, it was a tragedy. And he was the villain. The second the elevator door slid shut, sealing Grace Allen inside. The facade Austin was clinging to shattered. The just business excuse, the self-preservation, all dissolved, leaving behind a raw, gaping wound. What have I done? The question wasn't a thought, it was a scream inside his skull. The silence of the hallway was deafening, accusing. The guilt wasn't a slow creep, it was a tidal wave, a shocking and absolute submersion. He ran. He didn't walk. He ran back to his penthouse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He slammed the door, leaning against it as if the hounds of hell were at his heels. And, in a way, they were. He saw his reflection in a dark window of the powerful landlord, the image of success. He punched it. The glass shattered, cutting his knuckles, but he barely felt it. The emotional pain was so vast, it dwarfed the physical. He saw her eyes. That last look, the disappointment. He hadn't just evicted a poor woman. He had betrayed a person. The only one who had seen past his monstrous exterior and spoken to the tiny, hidden part of him that was still human. He had taken that trust, that nascent love story, and he had strangled it with his own two hands. He had destroyed the only real thing he had ever met. His world, which he had sacrificed her for, now meant nothing. The luxury apartment, the high-paying job, the status, it all felt like a pile of ash. He had stood at the crossroads of rich versus poor, of cynicism versus hope, and he had chosen the coward's path. He had chosen things over a soul. This was a life-changing realization, and it was agonizing. The drama was over. This was the aftermath. He slumped to the floor, his back against the broken glass, ignoring the blood dripping onto the marble. The romance he had briefly imagined, the redemption he had tasted, all of it was a joke. And he was the punchline. He had humiliated himself, proving he was exactly the hollow monster Grace had probably suspected he was all along. He replayed the entire last few weeks. The fire alarm, their conversation, the 10,000 check, his pathetic defense of her to Bianca. It was all a lie, because when the real test came, he failed. He wasn't just a bad person, he was a weak one. And in that moment, he wasn't sure which was worse. He had no idea about her secret identity. He didn't know she owned the building. He believed with all his heart that he had just cast a kind, gentle, poor woman out onto the street. He pictured her in a shelter, or worse. The guilt was suffocating. He was the villain. There was no plot twist that could save him now. Or so he thought. He had to find her. The thought was a sudden, sharp clarity through the fog of his despair. This wasn't about saving his job. This wasn't even about redemption. This was simpler. He had to find her. He had to tell her he was sorry. He had to beg for her forgiveness, even if he didn't deserve it. This was the bottom, the absolute rock-bottom moment of his life. The heart-touching connection he had felt was now the source of his deepest pain. He had to fix it. He scrambled to his feet, blood and guilt mixing, and ran for the door. He didn't know where she was, but he knew he wouldn't stop until he found her. Austin was still reeling, his hand wrapped in a bloody towel, when Bianca stormed into his penthouse. She didn't use a key. She pounded on the door until he opened it, her face a mask of triumphant rage. "So it's done," she celebrated, pushing past him. "I saw her. I saw the old witch walking out. Victory!" She poured herself a drink from his bar, oblivious to the broken glass on the floor or the look of utter devastation on his face. "A toast, darling. To us. To finally cleaning house." He just stared at her. Her celebration, her joy at Grace's destruction, was the most grotesque, repulsive thing he had ever witnessed. This was the woman he was going to marry. This was a reflection of his own soul. The rich versus poor battle she was celebrating felt like a war crime. The poor woman she was mocking was the only person in the world he cared about. "Get out," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rasp. Bianca laughed. "Oh, Austin, don't be so dramatic. It's over. You did it. You won." She sauntered over to him, running a finger down his chest. "You see? I told you. This is our world." He grabbed her wrist, his grip so tight she winced. "I'm in love with her," he said, the words tasting like blood and freedom. "I'm in love with Grace." The silence in the room was absolute. Bianca's celebratory smile froze, then curdled into disbelief, then pure, unadulterated fury. "You're in love? With a vagrant? The woman you just made homeless?" She shrieked. "Are you insane? You just threw her into the street. That is a shocking way to show your love." And she was right. The irony was acidic. He was a monster. "That's the point," Austin said, his voice breaking. He let go of her wrist. "I am a monster. But I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with you." He yanked the multi-carat diamond ring off her finger, ignoring her scream of protest. "I am disgusted," he said, "by what we become, by what I've become. I'm disgusted by this." He gestured to the opulent, empty room. "And I am disgusted by you." Wow. The plot twist of his own heart was complete. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an exorcism. He was finally choosing a side, not in the rich versus poor war, but in the war for his own soul. The love story with Grace, however impossible, was the only true love he had ever touched, and he had just destroyed it. But he could at least destroy the life that made him destroy it. Bianca was humiliated. She slapped him hard, the sound cracking in the room. "You will regret this, Austin Patterson. You are nothing without me. You're nothing without this world." She stormed out, slamming the door, her threats echoing behind her. But Austin felt nothing, only a vast, aching emptiness where Grace should be. His redemption was starting, not with a noble act, but with a total detonation of his old life. He had lost his fiancée. He had certainly lost his job, and he had evicted the woman he loved. He was, for the first time, truly alone, and in that aloneness, he had only one singular purpose. He looked at his bloody hand, then at the door. The romance was a tragedy. The drama was his own fault. But the search was all he had left. His engagement was broken. His life was broken. Now, he had to find the woman he had broken and beg for forgiveness. The moment Bianca was gone, Austin's despair coalesced into frantic, desperate action. The landlord was gone. The broken man was gone. In his place was a man on a singular, life-changing mission. He had to find Grace Allen. He couldn't live with the thought of that kind, gentle, poor woman out on the streets. All because of him. The drama of his breakup was nothing compared to the emotional urgency of this. His redemption depended on it. He spent the entire night frantically searching. His search began in the most obvious and most terrifying places. He drove his luxury car, a symbol of the rich versus poor divide. He now dispossessed every homeless shelter in the downtown area. At each one, the man in the bloodstained 500S suit, would run inside, showing a blurry old tenant photo of Grace on his phone, his voice cracking. "Have you seen this woman? Please. Her name is Grace." Each no was a hammer blow to his heart. The people he spoke to, the volunteers and the residents, looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and pity. He was a tourist in their world of real pain. He was humiliated, but this time it was a righteous humiliation. He deserved this. He deserved to feel this panic, this helplessness. He was living, for a few hours, in the fear he had so casually inflicted on her. As the hours dragged on, his panic escalated. What if she wasn't at a shelter? His mind went to darker places. He started calling hospitals, his voice trembling. "I'm looking for a Grace Allen. She might have been brought in. I don't know." Each hold, each no record found, ratcheted up his terror. This heart-touching woman, who had shown him nothing but kindness, could be hurt or worse. This was a turnaround, the point where his guilt transformed from a passive burden into an active, driving force. He was shedding his old skin. He didn't care about his job, his car, his reputation. He only cared about her safety. The love story, the impossible romance, had become a quest. He wasn't just looking for her. He was looking for forgiveness. He was desperate to beg her to forgive him. Not so he could feel better, but so she would know she wasn't worthless. He was the one who was. He checked bus stations. He walked through parks at 3 a.m., calling her name. He was a mess dirty, bloody, crying, "The man who owned the building," or so. He thought was now the most lost man in the city. The secret identity of Grace Allen was so effective that she had simply vanished. He couldn't find her in the world he had consigned her to. As dawn approached, he was defeated, exhausted, and utterly broken. He hadn't found her. The poor woman had evicted was gone. He collapsed on a park bench, the city waking up around him, a complete failure. He had destroyed the only true love had ever known. He had nowhere else to look. He was too late, but the plot twist was still coming. He had looked for her in all the places he assumed she would beta places for the poor and destitute. He had never, not for 1 second, considered looking in the other direction. The most shocking surprise of his life was just hours away. After a night of hell, Austin was a broken man. He stumbled back to his penthouse, defeated. He had failed. He couldn't find her. He had evicted her and lost her forever. He was about to collapse when his eyes fell on a thick, cream-colored envelope on his floor, mixed with the junk mail. The annual city philanthropy gala. It was tonight. Had been invited as the manager of the Grand, a pillar of the community. The irony was so bitter, he almost laughed. He was about to throw it away when a memory, a tiny, fragmented piece of lobby chatter, hit him. Grace Allen. She volunteers for all those charity things. It was a long shot, a desperate long shot. But it was the only shot he had. He hadn't found her in the world of the poor. Maybe, just maybe, She was in the world of the charitable. He showered, put on his best tuxedo, and when his heart pounding with fragile, terrified hope at the gala was a sea of the city's elite, the very definition of the rich versus poor divide, he felt like a ghost, scanning the crowd, the volunteers, the staff, that nothing. He was an idiot, a desperate fool. He was about to leave, to finally accept his defeat. When the lights dimmed, a man took the stage, and now the MC boomed. We honor a person who, for decades, has been the city's greatest and most anonymous philanthropist. Austin froze as she has saved countless institutions, funded hospitals, and built shelters, all without her name ever being known. Tonight, she has finally agreed to accept our Heart of the City award. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Grace Allen. The name hit Austin like a physical force. He stopped breathing. No, it couldn't be. He turned to the stage, and the world stopped. There she was at his grace, the poor woman from 3B, the woman he had evicted. But she wasn't wearing a simple cardigan. She was wearing an elegant, stunning evening gown, her hair styled, looking radiant, powerful, and completely at home. She walked onto the stage to a deafening, standing ovation. This was the plot twist, the shocking, life-changing. Surprise that Austin's brain literally could not compute. He was frozen in shock, his mind short-circuiting the poor woman, the philanthropist, the secret identity. It was all too much. He felt the blood drain from his face. The drama was overwhelming. That Grace Allen, the woman, had offered 10,000 toes, stepped up to the microphone, the same calm, kind smile on her face as she began to speak, her voice echoing through the grand ballroom, the same voice that had guided people during the fire. And then her eyes scanned the crowd, and they found him. They locked with she saw him, the man who had humiliated and evicted her just 24 hours earlier. She didn't falter. She didn't look angry. She just held his gaze for a second, a silent, all-knowing acknowledgement, and then she continued her speech. That Austin Patterson was shattered. The secret owner wasn't just a rumor. She owned the building. She owned the city, and he was the fool on the hill. The redemption he was searching for suddenly seemed infinitely more complex. Austin didn't sleep. How could he? The shocking revelation of the gala had rewired his entire brain. To Grace Allen, the city's largest philanthropist, his Grace, the poor woman, who was, in fact, richer and more powerful than anyone in that ballroom. He was in a state of emotional freefall. But the final piece of the puzzle hadn't yet slotted into place. That would happen this morning. He had one last, dreaded obligation at the emergency board meeting he had called days ago, to finalize the mass evictions. The irony was so thick. He was choking on it. He walked into conference room, pale, trembling, a dead man walking the other investors. The men who had pressured him were already there, looking impatient. Patterson, you look like hell, one of them grumbled. Let's get this over with. The evicted list is ready, right? Austin, the once-proud landlord, just sank into his chair. He couldn't speak. He was a ghost. Before we begin, the interim chairman said, looking flustered, there's been a significant development, a change in the majority shareholding. Oh, note, Austin's blood ran cold. He knew what was coming. The drama was reaching its climax. The new majority shareholder has strong opinions on the current management and has insisted on attending this meeting to reevaluate. The room tense. The investors looked annoyed at the surprise change. Please be respectful. And she is, she is a new boss. The doors of the conference room opened, and Grace Allen walked in. Not the gala Grace, not the 3B Grace. This was a new Grace. She wore a sharp, impeccably tailored business suit. She radiated an authority that was absolute. She was not the kind, poor woman. She was not the elegant philanthropist. This was a secret owner. This was a soda. This was a woman who owned the building and, as Austin now understood, the entire management company. If Austin had been pale before, he was now translucent. The other board members, the men who had mocked the old woman in 3B, looked like they'd seen a ghost. Their faces went from annoyance to confusion to pure, unadulterated terror. This was a plot twist, and all plot twist the woman had ordered evicted was, in fact, their boss. Good morning, gentlemen, Grace Allen said, her voice like smooth, cold steel. She walked to the head of the table, the seat of power, and placed her briefcase down. I understand you were just about to finalize the eviction of... I'll meet. The silence was deafening. She was In effect, serving them their own revenge, she looked at each of them, her gaze lingering for a heart-stopping second on Austin. He was broken. He was humiliated. This was the ultimate reversal of the rich versus poor dynamic. The secret identity was out there, and the woman everyone saw as a victim was now holding all the cards. The surprise was complete now. The judgment would begin. The air in the boardroom was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Grace Allen stood at the head of the table, an island of calm power in a sea of panic. Middle-aged men, she let the silence stretch, forcing them to squirm, to truly see her. The men who referred to her as the old hag and the pest were now visibly sweating. Avoiding her gaze, the drama was palpable. This was her stage, and the final act had begun for 3 years. She began, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a gavel. I have lived in 3B. I started this company, the Grand itself, with my late husband on the principal community. But I saw a rot, a decay in our values. She looked directly at the investors. I saw men who valued profit over people. So I disguised myself. I became the poor woman you all so despise. To see the truth of myself, her secret identity was laid bare. She owned the building. She owned the entire company. She was the anonymous majority shareholder they had all been answering to indirectly. For years, this plot twist was shocking, not just for its audacity, but for what it implied she had seen. Everything, their petty cruelties, their lazy management, their greed. I saw a management style that actively sought to evict the vulnerable. She continued, her eyes sweeping the room. I saw a culture that encouraged the rich versus poor divide, that celebrated cruelty. Her gaze finally, inevitably, landed on Austin Patterson. He was pale, broken, not even trying to hide his shame. He just looked at her, his eyes filled with desperate, unspoken apology. He was utterly humiliated, and then she said, her voice softening just a fraction, I saw you, Mr. Patterson. The entire room turned him. He was the focal point of her revenge. That you were the embodiment of that rot, the perfect, ruthless landlord. You followed every order. You tried to humiliate me. You offered me money. And then she paused. You locked me out of my own home. This was the climax, the moment of execution. Austin squeezed his eyes shut, ready for the axe to fall. He deserved it. He deserved to be fired, to be ruined. He had failed every test. He had betrayed her. He had broken her trust. In his own heart, the emotional weight in the room was crushing. But then she spoke again, and it wasn't what anyone expected. You were all those things, she said, looking at Austin, but you were something else. Too, that you were conflicted. You were the only one who saw me as a person, the only one who felt guilt, the surprise. This wasn't revenge. This was something far more complicated. She knew about his defense of her to Bianca. She knew he was torment. The secret owner wasn't just a boss. She was omniscient. She had been testing not just his cruelty, but the potential for his redemption. And now, in front of everyone, she was about to deliver her final verdict. Austin looked up, his eyes wide with shocking, fragile hope. He was still broken, still humiliated, but her words. Guilt? He hadn't expected acknowledgement. He had expected revenge. Grace Allen turned her attention back to frozen board members. You men are fired. All of you, that your contracts are terminated. Effective immediately, security will escort you out. The drama was swift, merciless. The men sputtered, but one look from her silence and they were, in effect, evicted. The room cleared until it was just Grace and a trembling Austin. The silence was deafening. He was the last one, the landlord, who had failed. He slowly, painfully got his feet. Grace. He couldn't. The words wouldn't come. He didn't deserve to speak to her. He was the worst of them all. That you were looking for me. She said, it wasn't a question. You spent all night searching, checking shelters, hospitals. He stared at her. How could she know? I have that good security. Austin, they tracked your movements. They told me you broke your engagement. They told me you were, for lack of a better term, having a complete emotional breakdown. She knew his remorse was genuine. This was the final plot twist. The surprise wasn't that she was a secret owner. The surprise was that she was merciful to humbled, shattered. Austin finally broke. I don't care about the job, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. I don't care that you own the building. I am so sorry. I betrayed you. That I betrayed. I am begging you, not for my job, but for my heart. I am so in love with you, Grace, and I am so sorry. This was his true redemption, not a grand gesture, but a raw, honest confession, a heart-touching moment of surrender. He had completed his life-changing journey. From arrogant landlord to a humble man, the rich versus poor battle was over. He was just, not poor. And he needed her that Grace Allen closed the distance between them. She looked at him. The poor woman seeing the truly poor man in front of her. She saw his true love, his genuine remorse. She put a hand on his cheek. That I know. She said softly, I forgive you. Austin, I offer you a partnership. She said. He looked confused. I don't need a ruthless manager, but I do need a partner, someone who has seen the darkness and chosen the light, someone who understands. At the human heart, she smiled. Let's run this company together. Austin the right way at the romance and the love story at the beginning. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about a new beginning to redemption that was earned, not given. Not together. They would change the company and each other forever. What a life-changing journey. This story reminds us that true power isn't about what you own. It is about who you are when no one is watching. It's a heart-touching lesson that the real plot twist in life is discovering that humility is a superpower, and true love and redemption are the only currencies that truly matter. If you also believe that kindness is the ultimate strength, and that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, then you have found your community. This is what we're all about, so subscribe and join the family of thinkers, feelers, and believers in a better world. This video is a sign of respect for Grace's incredible lesson in kindness. Comment with the exact moment in the story that hit you the hardest. Was it the humiliation, the shocking gala, or the final forgiveness? And share this story with one person who needs to be reminded that a life-changing comeback is always possible. And while you wait for our next story, know that our channel is a treasure chest filled with emotional journeys just like this one. Explore our other videos and discover more shocking twists and powerful moments of justice. And to make sure you never miss out on the incredible stories we have coming, activate that notification bell. We are always searching for the next amazing tale, and you won't want to miss the emotions we have in store. Thank you for watching.